Okay, welcome to 1 minute and 43 seconds, a true Unsolved Mysteries podcast. I'm here with my dear friend, Sohaib Q. Say hi, Sohaib.
Hi, everyone.
And I'm here with my dear boyfriend, Wesley.
Hello.
He's a little shy, but he's going to be here to talk with us, hopefully. So, how familiar are you guys with D.B. Cooper?
Well, I have heard of the story. It's like one of the more famous unsolved mysteries in the FBI.
Yes, that's very true. It's actually one of the most infamous incidents in history.
And also changed how we deal with airplane hijackers.
Well, that's true, but I feel like if anything changed that, it would have been 9/11, don't you think? Because that was a hijacking unlike any other hijacking that's ever taken
that
place.
changed how we deal with a lot of security, but
True.
Not airplane hijackers, because there's still pirates that do this in the rest of the world where they hijack planes. Not in America anymore, thankfully.
Yeah. It's something I haven't done too much research on, but I should, because I don't know many hijacking stories, but this is one of them. So I'm going to just kind of go through the details of it, and then you guys can comment on it where you want, ask questions where you want, and we'll just discuss it. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's see. So Dan Cooper is a pseudonym of an unidentified man who hijacked a Boeing 727 aircraft in the United States. He was in the area between Portland and Seattle, Washington. And this took place in 1971 on the eve of Thanksgiving, so the night before Thanksgiving. The man approached the desk at Portland International Airport and purchased a ticket.
A one-way ticket to Seattle.
Yes, thank you. A one-way ticket to Seattle. So he boarded the aircraft, and he was in seat 18C, which is a very random detail.
Well, it's actually not, because it was the back of the plane. The 727 is actually a really small domestic plane.
Is it?
Yeah, so It's not meant to go far, it wasn't meant to go long distances. It was meant to actually just go, between nearby cities, if we're considering, Portland to Seattle, or LA to Las Vegas, or, hopping. If it tried to go coast to coast, it would be, Seattle, Denver, Chicago, New York. It couldn't go Seattle to New York directly.
So where was this plane? I see. So you're right. So the plane was taking off from Portland and it was bound for Seattle. That's pretty close, right?
Yeah, if you were to drive it, it would take 4 to 5 hours.
So that's a 2-minute plane ride or something?
1 hour plane ride.
I'm just kidding. Okay.
So half a day driving versus, a 1 hour flight.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
It's like going from here to St. Louis. To put it in some perspective, since we're in the Midwest.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So let's see here. So he identifies himself as Dan Cooper. This is Flight 305. 30-minute trip, it says here, north to Seattle. So he boarded the aircraft, which you said was a Boeing 727, took 18C, which is in the back of the plane. So he was said to be very quiet. He was said to be in his mid-40s. He was wearing a business suit, a black tie, a white shirt. He ordered a bourbon and soda while the flight was waiting to take off, which wouldn't have been my first choice. But hey, what are you going to do?
So shortly after takeoff, he handed the stewardess a note saying that he's got a bomb. Correct.
Yes. So actually the flight was Flight 305. It was 1/3 full. It departed on schedule at 2:50 Pacific time. And as you said, shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to Florence Schaffner, who was a flight attendant. She was the nearest flight attendant to him, where he was seated. So Schaffner, the flight attendant, assumed it was just like some business guy hitting on her. She just kind of like threw it in her bag and like ignored it, right? Which I think is funny. And so eventually he leaned forward to her and whispered to her, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." So at that point, she's probably like, "Oh, okay, this is not some guy hitting on me. This is..."
Next crazy guy for today.
Yeah. So
let's remember, this is stewardesses in the 70s. They were hit on a lot. They were sexually harassed by passengers. Cause
I'm sure they still are.
Well, they still are, but it's way more common back then for them to get away with it.
Yeah.
Plus, he was smoking.
That's true.
Plane.
More socially acceptable, I guess.
Wouldn't say acceptable.
That's true. He was smoking because you could do that in the 70s on an airline, which is.
Well, that's set earlier.
They get to the 70s, though.
Yeah.
All right. So the note was printed in neat all capital letters with a felt tip pen. The exact wording is unknown because Cooper took it back eventually. But the flight attendant, Schaffner, remembered that it said that Cooper had a bomb in his briefcase. So after she read this note, Cooper said for her to sit next to him. So she did so as requested. And she asked to see the bomb. So Cooper opens his briefcase long enough for her to get a glimpse of the 8 red cylinders that he had inside the bag, attached to wires coated with red insulation and a large cylindrical battery. So after he closed the briefcase, he stated his demands, which were $200,000 in, quote, negotiable American currency, 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft upon arrival. So this flight attendant conveyed Cooper's instructions to the pilots, and when she got back from telling them this, Cooper was wearing dark sunglasses. So she goes and tells the pilots, and I guess they're like, okay, I guess, because pre-9/11, it wasn't like a death sentence.
It wasn't even pre-9/11. This is one of the first plane hijackings in history. This isn't the first, but it's one of them. So it's like their handbook pretty much says, yeah, these guys are going to stop somewhere. They can't go far.
Right.
So if they've tried this, the best thing to do is get the hostages out safely and give them the money if that's what it takes, because you still have to worry about the lives of the pilots and everybody else. So at the time, they're thinking, the cockpit conveys down to the FBI, or I'm guessing air traffic control, which calls the FBI and says, hey, this is what's going on. So they bring the parachutes and the money.
What I don't understand, and we can get to this later because we're jumping ahead, but what I don't understand is why they didn't have FBI or police or something storm the plane when they landed.
Because that wasn't protocol. Back then, the issue was taking over a plane when you know you have a bomber. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, this is a suicide bombing mission, right? Like, if things go wrong, you assume that this guy isn't going to be taken alive. He's going to explode. So that means...
But this was before 9/11. In the past, haven't there been hijackings where it's just been like, give me what I want?
Suicide missions have been going on forever. I mean, you go with kamikaze pilots in World War II. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not unheard of for people to kill themselves for their cause or whatever, or to avoid capture. So that's not they had to go with the odds. They're like, okay, we got to figure out what's going on, the best things we can do. Like, their primary goal was to get the hostages out, right? That's all they really care about. Give them the money, it's trackable, give them the parachutes. They didn't think he'd jump because that's stupid to try to jump at night. We'll talk about that later. At that point, when he passes these instructions, it's like, okay, fine. We'll convey this and we'll stop and whatnot, and you'll get your stuff, but you're probably not going to make it. Like him, even later on when he says, let's fly to Mexico City, it's like, are you insane? Like, you can't just fly somewhere. Like, that comes back to the part of this story where they knew they had to land in Reno on the way out.
Let's step back. Because that is what's going to happen.
So yeah, finish the background story, and then we'll come back to actually talking about it.
Okay.
Do the whole background, and then we'll.
Yeah.
Back.
No, I like this. I like talking about it too. So the flight attendant Schaffner conveyed Cooper's instructions to the pilots, as I said. So the pilot, who was a man named William Scott, contacted Seattle-Tacoma Airport Air Traffic Control, who then contacted federal authorities. This is something I thought was kind of interesting. The passengers, the 35 other passengers on board, were given fake information. So they told the passengers that their arrival in Seattle would be delayed because of a, quote, minor mechanical difficulty.
It's a hijack.
It's a minor thing.
Yeah. So
but they circled Seattle Airport for hours.
So Northwest, which was the airline, I guess.
Defunct now.
Right. So Northwest Orient's president authorized payment of the ransom and ordered all employees to cooperate fully with the hijackers' demands. Which, I guess, like you were saying, that's protocol, I guess.
Well, the airline didn't want to get stuck with the bad publicity of one of their planes blowing up. So, blowing up with 35 passengers, they'd essentially have to pay out, at the time it's the 70s, maybe $500,000 a person in terms of liability. So
it's a pretty penny.
Yeah, so it's easier to just give them $200K and be like, all right, go. You've got a bomb, you can take it. We'll send the FBI after you. You're going to never, they're hoping that they'll get all their money back. But at the end of the day, they're insured for it as well. So it's like, okay, yeah, this is
not
the cost.
A big deal, or it's
the cost of business. It's a bigger deal to resist.
Yeah.
This is why
bigger risk in resisting than just.
Right. This is why kidnapping is an industry in Latin America. The foreign companies are more willing to pay for the ransom than they are to fight it and risk their employees dying.
Mm-hmm. So as you said, the aircraft circled the airport for about 2 hours to allow the police and the FBI to get what Cooper wanted, which were the parachutes and the ransom money. And they were also mobilizing emergency personnel. So another flight attendant by the name of Tina Mucklow remembered that Cooper seemed to be familiar with the local terrain. And at one point he even said, "Oh, that looks like Tacoma down there," as the aircraft was flying over Tacoma. He also mentioned that McCord Air Force Base was only a 20-minute drive from Seattle-Tacoma Airport. The other flight attendant, the first flight attendant, Schaffner, described him as calm, polite, well-spoken, and not at all consistent with the stereotypes of enraged and hardened criminals. So, they said he wasn't nervous. He was nice, he was never cruel, he was never mean, he was never nasty, and he was even considered thoughtful. He also ordered a second bourbon and soda, and he paid his drink tab, which I find really funny. You're demanding $200,000, but you're paying your drink tab. That's
Not
good.
a bad person.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, come on, he's got a heart, right? So the FBI assembled the ransom money from several Seattle area banks, and they tracked the serial numbers on these bills. So, they could eventually, hopefully, track him. And they made a microfilm photograph of each bill. Another thing is that Cooper rejected the military-issued parachutes offered by the McCord AFB personnel, instead demanding civilian parachutes with manually operated ripcords. So the police obtained those from a local skydiving school.
Yeah.
Which, what does that say to you guys? I mean, it
To
seems
me,
like,
I think he wanted something he was familiar with.
right, exactly. So
he must have been skydiving with local areas.
So you don't, does that mean then that he most likely didn't have military experience or
I wouldn't say that. It's the 70s. So if he was in his
mid-40s, they say?
Yeah, if he was in his 40s, that means he might have seen action in, would it have been World War II? That he would have been in his 20s?
How about Wes, our math expert over here? So if he was in his mid-40s, let's say he was 45 in the 1971, what would he have been during World War II?
No, he wouldn't have been in World War II. He would have been in Korea.
Okay.
More likely.
All right.
But he could have been in the military.
Okay.
Because, America has had no shortage of war.
I guess you never know. But I just found it interesting that he requested these civilian parachutes. But anyway, maybe that's an irrelevant detail. So at 5:24 p.m.
I think it's more relevant to think about the fact that he asked for 4 parachutes.
That is weird. Why?
Well, so the theory is, and the FBI actually said this, that they thought that he asked for 2 front, 2 reserve. Mm-hmm. So, have you guys gone skydiving before?
No, and I ain't gonna do it either.
Well, I've done it, and the fun part is that you have your front parachute, which is the primary. You can rip that cord. If that fails, then you have a reserve.
Right.
And the likelihood of both failing are really, really low because if it does, you're dead. But the idea was that they thought that he was going to use them tandem, right? So he was going to use his 2 parachutes, but he might have also taken a hostage with him. So that's why he wanted 4. So 2 for him, 2 for the hostage. And initially that's why you'd ask for parachutes, right? He didn't, I don't know why he didn't think this far ahead to just carry them on. He could have had his own parachute and a decent carry-on bag would fit them.
Yeah.
Maybe he just didn't have them or didn't want to deal with it. I don't know.
That's an interesting point.
That's why the FBI didn't tamper with him. They didn't know if he was going to take a hostage. They didn't want to kill an innocent. So they gave him his parachutes without messing with
do you think he knew that? Do you think he requested 4 because he had the foresight to think, I don't want them messing with this. If I request more than one, they're going to think I'm going to take a hostage.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's why he did it. He's like, yep, let's make them think I'm going to take multiple people.
That's interesting. I never even thought of that before.
Well, that's what the FBI thought. This is why they didn't tamper with him. They could have easily made slit holes in all of them or cut the strings and been like, yeah, here are your parachutes. They don't function, so good luck jumping.
Then they would have basically been killing him.
Yeah, but who cares? He's a hijacker.
Well, see, that's where it comes back to why not just storm the plane. But anyway.
But again, it's the saving civilians, right?
Well, yeah.
But so that's why they didn't.
You let the passengers go.
Yeah, but
then storm the plane.
No, but then he still had a bomb on board.
Yeah.
And he had 4 people.
The pilots and the flight attendants.
The pilots and the flight attendants were still on board. So you still have 4 innocent lives for the one. And again, let's remember, even in the 70s, it's only $200K, right? It's not worth blowing up a plane.
Only $200K. I'll take it.
Yeah, but is it really? He is potentially going to jail for life. And you would think that there's not a lot of places to hide in general, right? Even in the 70s, right? You've got work history, you've got tracking bills and all that stuff. The modern day banking has gotten a lot more secure. There's not many places you can hide with the money. Mm-hmm. So they're all thinking, okay, you know what? Don't worry about it. We'll catch him on the back end. Let's get everybody else out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's why they made the bills.
That's why they made the decisions they did.
Trackable and whatnot.
Well, yeah, and that's why they made the decisions they did, right? Because it's all about looking at the odds and looking at it's chess, right? It's thinking about what your next moves are. Is it better for me to let him go today and go after him tomorrow? Or do I go after him now because I'm worried that he'll get away? If I go after him now, I risk losing all my other pieces. Is it worth it?
Right. No, that makes sense. Okay. So at 5:24 p.m. Pacific time, Cooper was informed that his demands had been met, and at 5:39 p.m., The plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. It was more than an hour after sunset. So Cooper instructed the pilot, who was William Scott, to taxi the jet to an isolated, brightly lit section of the airfield. So, in the cabin to deter snipers. Excuse me, I'm sorry. He wanted all the window shades closed in the plane to deter snipers. So now that answers my question. I guess I should have done some further reading.
He thought a lot about what to do and how to get around it. But
yeah, this was a well thought out, obviously. I mean,
but it also comes back to that's why you can't. And let's also remember, even today, you can't storm a plane. There's very limited points of entry, and it's still a long metal tube full of jet fuel.
That's true. I don't know what listen, I'm an amateur. I mean, I'm just have these ideas, and I anyway. But that makes sense.
Parachutes while planes are crashing. Yeah, that was a bad one.
Yeah, we'll go over that another time. But I see the flaw in that idea now.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the Northwest Airlines, the operations manager, approached the aircraft in street clothes to avoid the possibility that Cooper might mistake him for, law enforcement or part of the FBI. He was the one that delivered the cash to Cooper and parachutes. So he gave those to Tina Mucklow, which was one of the flight attendants, via the aircraft stairs. So once the delivery was completed, Cooper ordered all the passengers, Schaffner and the senior flight attendant, to leave the plane. So everybody's out now, except for, I believe, Mucklow and then the pilots.
Yeah.
So during refueling, Cooper outlined his flight plan to the crew. He wanted a southeast course towards Mexico City at minimum airspeed, about 100 knots.
And 10,000 feet.
Exactly, 10,000 feet, that's like what the standard where people jump out of planes, right?
That's the standard height for any jump. But let's also remember that jumps are done in controlled environments. No one's jumping at night in cloud coverage in a snowstorm over a mountainous region, forested region.
But hold up. Oh, yeah, I guess it would have been dark, right?
Because it would have been dark.
It was almost 6 p.m. and it was in
They also
November.
mentioned past sunset.
Yeah,
that's the key.
They did, didn't they?
That's the key, because that's the biggest reason everybody thinks that he died on the jump. Because when you're doing that, I've gone sunrise jumps, and that's post light. There has to be the sun in the sky that you can see. Otherwise, you are doing this way too blind. And even then, we've got flares circling our landing spot. We've got modern, when I did this, it's been almost 10 years now. But when we did this, I didn't have control style.
Really?
Oh yeah, no.
Did you have a tandem jumper with you?
No, I was doing this on my own. But my controls were the basic. I can push this way or push this way.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have the straps.
Okay.
So I had to lean my body weight where I need to go, but for the most part, I had to be on point, and I had other people with me, so I wasn't going by myself.
Right.
So there was a group of us going. We're all keeping contact with each other. We're all keeping ourselves in eyesight, but we're all going down for the most part. We're also 100% sure that there is no rain or cloud coverage or anything in our way, because then it's not good diving conditions. And he did not have that. Not to mention, he's flying from from Seattle south.
Right.
That's either forest or desert. Pick. Those are your two options. Until you get to some random city, you've either got forested areas with mountains, or you've got flat desert.
I would pick flat desert if it were me.
But you don't get to pick, right? Because
you do if you're,
No, because
you choose a point at which you're jumping.
But you don't know when you're jumping. You can have an idea of where you're going, but he didn't know, most planes, when they go up, they stay within the boundaries of the airport. Like when you do skydiving jumps, they're staying within their boundaries.
Mhm.
They're not going into residential or
Well, no.
or
You
outside
don't land in
airspace.
somebody's backyard.
Exactly. In his case, you don't know what he's doing. He had those two options. He didn't know what he was going to get.
Yeah, that's.
And you can set your speed all you want. There's going to be drag. There's going to be it goes down to say that he wanted to like keep the back door open and stuff. That adjusts your speed. That changes everything. Any little bit of drag when you're that high up could change your speed, even your direction, even by feet. But feet could be the difference between landing in a tree and landing in a flat surface.
Right.
So.
Well, so he had several demands, which were specific. So this guy, it seems like he clearly knew how airplanes work because he specified that the landing gear remain deployed. He asked that the wing flaps be lowered 15 degrees and that the cabin remain unpressurized. He has to have some basic knowledge of an airplane. Lower the flaps 15 degrees is not something I feel like an average person is going to be able to.
Not unless you research this or you know planes.
Right. So, as we said, he asked to go to Mexico City, but the pilot informed him that they had about 1,000 miles left of fuel. So they agreed eventually on Reno, Nevada as a refueling stop. And he also wanted Cooper, he wanted the staircase extended. But they let him know that it was unsafe to take off with the staircase extended.
Too much drag. He also wanted the wheels left down.
Right.
And that also creates a different level of drag. Like he was trying to slow them down as much as he could. And he was trying to keep the plane, because that's the other part. You can't jump out of a plane that's moving fast. It has to be going slow enough that you're not going to be hit with the with the vacuum that's being created around the plane.
I don't have an understanding. I knew that the plane had to be at 10,000 feet for somebody to jump out of it, but beyond that, I didn't know much of the science that went into it.
So when a plane is moving, it's moving at hundreds of miles per hour, right? It is going pretty fast, and that's part of it being the way it gets up is that it creates this down pressure behind the wings and the body of the plane. That's why they're all streamlined, because you need to basically get the air to flow faster under you than it is over you, and that's how you get uplift.
Yeah.
So part of that uplift is what's keeping the plane in the air. Problem is, if you're going too fast, you are going to get tossed around like a rag doll because there's nothing saving you. The air is thin up there. The momentum that you have from the plane is going to transfer into you. When you're jumping out of a plane, you're technically still moving forward at the speed of the plane until your body starts dragging backwards and the air slows you down to the point of gravity. Well, that's jumping out of. Yes, I can, because I've done this a few times.
Yeah, but I guess if you're DB Cooper and it's nighttime and you're breaking the law. There's there's all that pressure as well. So
you're going into this basically thinking you're a dead man.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Well, he must have thought he had a chance because he asked for all this money.
He thought he had a chance, but any time we're talking about this we're Monday morning quarterbacking this because this already happened. But think about it at the time of. You got some overzealous FBI sniper being like, I think I can get him. They fire around. They might miss. They might get him. Who knows? He might decide to blow up the plane any time. He's going into this as a dead man.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of risks.
There's a ton of risk. And if they had shot any one of those windows, the cabin could never be pressurized. You can't get off the ground. There's just no way that you're going to get up in the air to get enough lift to clear half of Seattle, let alone get halfway to Reno.
Yeah.
So, a lot of things had to be on point, and a lot of people had to not make stupid mistakes.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of strategy that goes into this, I'm sure.
Don't send the Homelander up there.
So this part is pretty interesting, right? So the plane took off, and this was about 7:40 p.m. Pacific time. I almost said specific time. 5 people were on board. So it was Cooper, the pilot, the co-pilot, a flight engineer, and
the flight attendant.
Flight attendant, excuse me.
Back then they were just stewardesses, though, right?
Correct, yeah. Tina Mucklow. This is interesting. So 2 F-106 fighter crafts were scrambled and following behind the airliner. One above and one below, out of Cooper's view.
Yeah.
Another, a Lockheed T-33 trainer, diverted from an unrelated Air National Guard mission, also followed the 727. And then it says, overall 5 planes were trailing this hijacked plane, and none of the pilots saw Cooper jump or could pinpoint a location where he could have landed, which is absolutely nuts. But I guess at nighttime it would be hard to see. But, I mean, you're the Air Force, aren't you?
It doesn't matter. Even at night, you can't see everything. And
True.
At night, your visibility is gone. That's why planes require radar. Like, there's a reason why they don't go by eyesight. Most pilots are using their radar to figure out where they're going and directional notes.
Well, they don't do nothing. They just set the GPS. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that's actually true now with autopilots in the current system. They barely pilots are there for backup, pretty much.
Yeah, to make sure nothing goes
screwed
wrong.
up, right? Yeah. And if it does, then they take over manually. And that's because humans are not comfortable with the computer doing all this for them yet. We'll get to a day when it's like, yep, it's an automated plane. You get on, you get off. It will fly you to where you need to be, and we will give it directions as necessary. But that's today's flying. Even back then, nighttime visibility is crap. These fighter pilots are keeping track of the plane with radar. They're not doing it any other way.
Right.
They're doing their best to keep track of the lights on the plane, I'm guessing, because that might show up. But it's not going to show that, hey, now you've got a guy jumping who's got no lighting on him, nothing reflective. Like, the dude is wearing, a suit and trench coat, right? The parachutes are white. They're not going to be reflective, and he would have to wait for him to open it to see it.
Right.
Plus, they said it was, still a cloudy, snowy day, right? It wasn't clear weather.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, that's right. Cooper had told the flight attendant to join the rest of the crew in the cockpit and stay there with the door closed. So she complied. But as she was making her way into the cockpit, she noticed Cooper was tying something around his waist. Around 8 o'clock p.m., there was a light that flashed that indicated that the air stairs, which he had wanted to be down when they took off. So they got an alert around 8 p.m. that they were deployed. So the door was open. At about 8:13 p.m., the aircraft's tail section sustained a sudden upward movement, significant enough to require trimming to bring the plane back to level flight. I do not know what trimming is.
Steering. They had to
steer.
They had to compensate.
Okay. So they landed around 10:15 p.m., and at the time they landed, the air stairs were still deployed. And they landed at Reno Airport. So FBI agents, state troopers, sheriff's deputies, and Reno police surrounded the jet because they didn't know at that point if Cooper was still on board.
Right. That's another part of it, because the people in the cockpit could not have checked. If the door was open, they would have been the air would have been really thin, and they would have been in danger of losing their own oxygen.
What do you mean?
So, the cockpit is
But he wanted it pressurized.
What?
Or he didn't want the air...
He wanted the stairs open for the whole thing.
He wanted the cabin depressure... Or is it? It's pressurized?
It's pressurized when you're up in the air.
So he wanted it depressurized.
Well, he needed it depressurized to jump. So what's happened is, think of it this way, you know how in movies they show that, people get sucked out of tiny windows when there's a little crack in the hull of an airplane?
Yeah.
That's not how it works. What would happen is that there'd be a lot of air shifting inside and stuff rolling around, and had the door been open in the back, the air, like the oxygen, would have been too thin. That's the key. Like
I see.
depressurizing it would mean you'd have not enough oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
So the cabin is separately pressurized. So when the guy opened the door and the stewardess and the pilots are in the front half with the door closed, they have their own pressurized system making sure that they stay oxygenated. While in the back, there isn't one. So they could not have checked. Like, no one can open the door the second they say, oh my God, he opened the back door. You can't go check because you risk depressurizing the whole cabin and everybody going unconscious.
Yeah.
So they had to just wait it out and land and then open the door and be like, oh, he's gone. That's it.
Right.
So.
And I guess that's what they did. So now we move on to the investigation portion of this whole ordeal. So FBI agents recovered 66 fingerprints on the airliner. They found Cooper's black clip-on tie.
A black clip-on tie. You can't guarantee it's his.
Well, this says Cooper's black clip-on
Everyone
tie. And
says
he was
it's
wearing a tie.
Everyone says that.
I mean, who else is it going to be? What are the chances?
I mean, we're also assuming that everybody's telling the truth.
That's a whole other,
Right? We're assuming that the stewardess isn't on it.
Well,
we're assuming that the pilots weren't in on it.
Oh, come on.
We're assuming that Northwest Airlines isn't in on it.
All right,
we're assuming a lot of stuff here.
You're making some bold accusations. But they also found 2 of his 4 parachutes. One which had been opened, and so one had been opened.
I'm guessing he used the cord of one of them to tie the money to him so he'd have it. And the other 2 were used as
Didn't you just shove it in your pants or something?
No, $200,000 in 20s is a decent-sized briefcase.
I guess that's true.
Because
Fair enough.
They gave him all $20 bills, right? They didn't give him higher denominations.
I don't know what they gave him, but it was $200,000.
So $200,000 in 20s is what? 10,000 bills? A stack of 1,000's about an inch tall. If you do it in hundreds, so thousands would be. Okay, yeah, you're looking at a decent sized bag.
It's a lot. It's
a decent sized bag of money or box of money or whatever carrying device they had.
So authorities interviewed eyewitnesses that had.
Eyewitnesses are crap.
Well, I'm just saying they interviewed them, and they came up with some composite sketches, which I'm going to post on the 143 Mysteries Instagram so everybody can see them. Local police began questioning possible suspects. They considered more than 800 people, and of these, all but 24 were eliminated from the investigation. In Oregon, do you guys say Oregon or Oregon?
Oregon Trail.
Because you don't call it an octagon. It's an octagon. You know what I'm saying?
But
anyway,
they're 2 different names.
The state, the state. An Oregon/Oregon man named D.B. Cooper, who had a minor police record, was one of the first persons of interest. And he was contacted by the police on the chance that he had used his real name. And he was ruled out.
But the newspaper stuck with DB, and that's why Dan Cooper became DB Cooper.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So a precise search area for DB or Dan Cooper was very difficult to define because even small differences in estimates of the aircraft's speed or the conditions in which he jumped along the flight path, which also varied.
Yeah, the flight path was changing too. Exactly.
So all of those things could have changed his projected landing point considerably. An important variable was the length of time he remained in free fall before pulling his ripcord.
Yeah, because he didn't have an altimeter.
What the hell is an altimeter?
An altimeter is a device that tells you how high you are in relation to the ground.
Oh, all right.
So yeah, you're supposed
Today
to
I
pull,
learned.
You're supposed to pull your chute anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 feet above the ground to get optimal targeting.
Mm-hmm.
Under 2,000, you're basically a smear on the ground. Over 3,000, you're gonna be like all over the place. No guarantee you're gonna land where you want to land. So, but you need to know that, and you can't eyeball it, because when you're falling at about it's about 1,000 feet per second.
Jeez. Can you imagine?
Because
well,
you
can imagine.
because your acceleration is not it's almost 9. It's 30 feet per second. So, but that's how you're accelerating. Once you hit terminal velocity, you're going about 1,000 feet a second ish. So it takes you about 5 seconds before you get to the point where it's like, okay, now I need to start pulling. And that's assuming that you're falling at a constant rate, because air temperature and wind and everything can decrease your fall.
Here's something.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Here's something interesting. So they did a recreation of this with the same pilot. And they determined, like we said before, that 813, which is when they felt that whatever, where they had to trim or steer or whatever, they felt that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
They determined that was the most likely time he jumped. And at that moment, the aircraft was flying through a heavy rainstorm over the Lewis River in southern Washington.
And if he didn't pull that parachute correctly, or let's not forget, he has got added weight with the money.
Yeah.
So we don't know if they even got the right parachutes, because parachutes are weighted by weight. So like, if you're a 200-pound man, you need a 200-pound carrying parachute.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't include the additional 10, 15 pounds of money you've got. So theoretically, if all the math didn't work out, he would have been a smear on top of the river and dead.
Yikes. So they coordinated all sorts of searches, right? They deployed the Oregon Army National Guard. They searched the waterways, and no trace of Cooper or any of the equipment on him was found. At least at first.
Just the parachutes.
Well, the parachutes, yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, the parachutes should have been something that would have been a throwaway. Like, he theoretically should have let them go somewhere.
What do you mean?
Like, no, most people don't think to collect your parachute after you use it, unless you're going to put it back. For the most part, you're going to just toss it and keep going.
You mean if you landed?
Yeah. If he landed,
Wow.
theoretically, he would have just taken off the backpack, like a backpack-style parachute, and kept going.
Perhaps. I mean,
But if he thought it through, he might have collected the parachute and then used it for, like, blankets and stuff, because he had nothing in the middle of winter.
that's true.
in
It
the
was
middle of
November,
Oregon.
late November, the night before Thanksgiving. So,
So middle of Oregon,
what is the weather like over there
cold.
at this time?
It's winter.
At that time of year.
I mean, it's winter, right? So,
Yeah, but like winter in Vietnam is like really pretty mild.
yeah, this is Northwest America.
I know. I'm just saying it varies. I don't get out as much, especially now with the COVID and whatnot. All right. So no evidence was found at first of Cooper. So, in addition to searching for Cooper, they're also searching for the ransom money. Exactly. Which we said was $200,000. So about a month after the hijacking, the FBI distributed lists of the serial numbers to various like racetracks, casinos, banks, businesses, places that like conducted significant transactions with cash, and to law enforcement agencies. The airline, Northwest Orient, offered a reward of 15% of the recovered money. In early 1972, U.S. Attorney General John N. Mitchell released the serial numbers to the public. Who cares?
But at the end of the day, they haven't actually found any.
They found some of it.
They found
The whole, yeah, they found
They didn't
some
find
of it.
any of Cooper's bills in circulation.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's right.
So the money has never been used as far as we can tell. And those serial numbers get, like, especially maybe not up until the 90s, but from the 90s onwards, every dollar bill that goes through a bank or any large taxable organization, serial numbers get tracked. So every dollar bill, every bill that you use, like in a casino or whatever, they put it through scanners that track the serial, that record serial numbers, and then compare it to not only ensure that it's legal currency, but it's also not fraudulent, because no company wants to be on the hook for money laundering.
Right.
So, and all these numbers are in every database. So if it had shown up on the grid, it would have been there. Now, obviously, with American dollars, you can circulate them in the black market and underground, but even then, U.S. currency usually finds its way back on the grid.
4 pieces of evidence, 2 definite and 2 potential, have been linked to D.B. Cooper, and they turned up between the years of 1978 and 2017. Okay? On Sunday, February 10th, 1980, 8-year-old Brian Ingram was vacationing with his family on the Columbia River at a beachfront town known as Tina Bar, about 9 miles from Vancouver. He uncovered 3 packets.
Vancouver?
Downstream, 9 miles downstream from Vancouver.
That's not right.
It's not?
No, because
Vancouver, Washington.
Okay.
Not Canada.
Canada.
No. Vancouver, Washington, excuse me.
You should make that distinction.
I will make it.
There's one Vancouver everybody knows about. It's in Canada.
Vancouver, Washington.
Hometown of Canada's greatest export, Ryan Reynolds.
All right. So he uncovered 3 packets of the ransom cash as he raked the sandy riverbank to build a campfire. The bills were significantly disintegrated, and they were still bundled in rubber bands. So FBI technicians confirmed that the money was indeed a portion of the ransom, 2 packets of $120 bills each, and a third packet of 90. Listen, if I'm that kid, that's kind of a lot.
How much was that money?
I'm sorry. So 2 packets of $120 bills each. It'll total it up.
Yeah.
A third packet of 90, all arranged in the same order as given to Cooper.
So the guy used $10, $20 bills. So he used $200 out of that pack.
Wait. This kid sold 15 of his bills at an auction in 2008 for about $37,000.
Yeah.
To date, none of the 9,710 remaining bills turned up anywhere in the world. Their serial numbers remain available online for public search. The Columbia River ransom money and the air stair instruction play card remain the only confirmed physical evidence from a hijack ever found outside the aircraft. So the play card, is that how, placard?
Placard. So, yeah.
That was found as well, and that was found in November of 1978, and that was found by a deer hunter, and that was in Castle Rock, Washington, but within the flight path.
Right, and that makes sense. Like, over time, the drag would have knocked out the placard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, those are the only 2 pieces that they've ever found. No parachutes, no clothes, no person matching any of the... every fingerprint they got has been accounted for or remains unknown. But it's not like anybody's come up in the system being like, oh, shit, there's a new criminal, and his fingerprints were in that plane. That hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So, theories on what the hell happened to this guy.
Okay, so first of all, do you guys think this guy survived his fall?
No.
You don't?
You know, that's the actual problem, because I don't think he survived, but then where's the body? And if he did survive, where's the money? So that's where it really comes down to. What might have happened is that he lost the money, and he made it.
But how do you... So you're saying during the fall, maybe he let go of it on it,
By accident, it might have come loose.
That would suck to go through all that stuff,
right.
And then you lose it?
then you lose it all. But then if he made it, then it's like, okay, I can't do this again.
Yeah. Well, the fact that some of the money was found by that kid, I mean, he definitely either lost some of it. I mean, because he's not gonna He's not gonna just hide it there.
No, but let's also remember that he's not far from the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
Like if he got caught in the river, died, he could have easily sunk and with the current gone to the ocean.
Really?
It's not impossible. It's not highly likely, but it's not 100% impossible.
You think he would have fallen in water over land? What are the chances he lands in a river? I mean, I don't know how wide the river is, but I mean...
That's the other part, though. If he had died on land, they would have found him. Somebody would have found his body. I mean, unless a grizzly bear ate him, which I doubt, because then they don't eat clothes.
Why not?
Because clothes are not tasty.
What do you think? You think he's alive, Wes?
I don't know. Maybe. It's possible.
Well, no matter what,
he died in prison.
No matter what, he, as a person, is probably dead.
Well, now he's probably dead because it's 2020.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he died
did he
before
survive the fall? I
doubt it.
You know...
Having gone skydiving, which is obviously not the same thing that this guy was doing, because he was doing this at night in a rainstorm off of a back end of a plane that's not meant to jump out of. Like, no guarantees on the speed or anything. Like, the pilot was not doing his best to make sure it was jumping condition.
So let me ask you.
The pilot was doing his best to get them to Reno. So that was his goal.
Let me ask you something, though. If your parachute deploys properly, which...
Let's say it does.
Let's say it does. How do you die then? In this type of... Is it you land on something that's...
If the parachute worked, and we're assuming that he didn't get tangled up on it, we're assuming it didn't rip up on entry or anything, you could still get caught in trees because this is over forest land.
Yeah, but would that kill you though?
Yeah.
Okay. How?
The fall, because once a parachute gets stuck on something, you can't use it, and then you got to get down somehow.
Yeah.
And you don't have people coming after you with the bladder. He's screwed.
Yeah. Okay.
Worst case would be to land in water and not actually brace it, because what could happen is if you landed in water, not knowing it was water, because it's also dark.
Right.
He didn't realize that he had to brace and get away from the parachute. He could have got tangled up in it.
Yeah.
In the water and drowned.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's true. And I tend to think...
there's so many ways to go bad. I mean... I don't know. There's just so much going on in terms of ways for him to get killed on the way down. But there's also the fact that there's a lack of body. So,
Yeah, but like you said...
Rule 101 when it comes to police work, no body, no crime.
Yeah, but it's a big world. Like you said, there's animals, there's water, there's all sorts of things. I mean...
But here's the thing. Animal attacks leave traces.
Well, sure, but this is the middle of... And I'm not familiar with where exactly he landed, or the area, the flight path.
Northwest U.S., doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what animal. An animal eating a person, a clothed person, would leave some sort of remnants.
Sure, but by now, I mean... How many years later could have been washed away? It could have been... No,
but let's talk about within the first 2 years.
Yeah, that's when they did a lot. I mean, that's when
there's a reason cold cases are anything above 5 years, right? At that point, evidence is gone. Eyewitness testimony is crap. I mean, it's crap in the beginning too, but information and time kill everything.
Mm-hmm.
So... At this point, the biggest part is the first year even. If an animal had killed him or eaten him, you would have found it. There are people going into those forests to hunt. The guy who found the placard was a deer hunter. These are areas that people travel to legitimately for exploration or for whatever purposes. There's no part of this country that's uninhabited or completely barren of human contact. Even a wilderness sanctuary gets visitors, or there's park rangers or whatever. The point is, like, if there was trace of him, they would have found it pretty early if he had died on land.
Here's just one more, if I can tell you. This is crazy because this was 3 years ago. So in 2017, a group of volunteer investigators uncover what they believe to be a decades-old parachute strap in the Pacific Northwest. So this was followed in August 2017 with a piece of foam that was suspected of being part of Cooper's backpack. So this isn't confirmed.
Where?
It just says the Pacific Northwest. It doesn't give exact location. But that's interesting in 2017.
Well, 2016, the FBI officially closed the case. They are no longer looking into D.B. Cooper. Because
that's crazy. And you know what else? The statute of limitations is
it's up.
Is up on this. So he could come forward and say,
if he's not already dead.
I mean, he's probably dead by now. If he survived
statute
the fall.
of limitations on criminal charges is up because hijacking and theft would be the biggest ones. But I don't know who has the debt to Northwest Airlines, but whoever originally paid the money can still go after him for the money.
Here's a question for you guys. This guy is kind of, as somebody who's really into unsolved mysteries and true crime, this guy seems to be kind of revered as like a badass, kind of like a legend, you know? Do you guys think of him as a legend, or do you think of him more as just like some criminal that should have been caught and punished?
Criminal, not a legend.
You don't think he's a badass? Like, oh man.
He'd be a badass if he truly got away with it.
And that's something we don't know. But
we don't know.
I'll tell you though, you guys, the fact that kid found the money makes me think something didn't go right for him. Because, I mean, do you think he knew that they would track that money, like the serial numbers?
I mean, he was smart enough to plan this out the way he did.
So why didn't he think that, they can trace this?
I don't know. Like, that's the other part of it. It's like, maybe the money's all he needs. Maybe he was going to go to some non-extradition country and just spend it all. Be like, I can launder it in Malta.
Could they catch him that way?
Well, no, it's the 70s, right? There's no international database of bad money.
There's not?
No, there is now. There wasn't then.
Interesting.
Like,
that's true. I didn't think of that, but yeah.
This is the 70s. Like, he's thinking, okay, even if they track this federally, I can take this money take it to Mexico, get it converted to pesos right away. Not my problem.
That's genius, actually.
So yeah, it's a long time ago. Or take it to, if he was a war veteran, like everybody says he was, go back to Korea or Vietnam, wherever he served. Probably do a ton of good there.
So why do you guys think he did it?
The money.
Or is that impossible to know unless
I'm guessing it's the money.
Well, yes,
200,000 is also a pretty low amount to ask for. It's on the level of, it's just low enough.
Yeah, but it was the 70s.
Yeah, still.
Hey, 200K is a lot of money to me. I mean, I'd take it.
Is it worth life in prison? Not really.
Would he have gotten life?
I don't know. What would the sentence have been for hijacking a plane?
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer.
Let's look it up, because, we need to know about these punishments before we commit crimes.
I don't know.
Punishment for...
But you know what? He's been in the storylines. This is cool. Cooper has appeared in storylines of the following television series: Prison Break, The Blacklist, News Radio, Leverage, Journeyman, Renegade, Numbers, 30 Rock, and Drunk History.
Yep.
So this guy is a legend in pop
aircraft
culture.
hijacking is punishable by life in prison.
All right.
And hey, there's no statute of limitations on this.
Well, let me see what it says on this. For statute of limitations.
Not for aircraft hijacking, even in the U.S.
Well,
there's no
is that post 9/11?
I'm not seeing.
Did it get more serious after that? Like, I don't know if that's a stupid question.
I'm not seeing any leniency before 9/11 for hijacking.
Well, I can tell you what it says on this. It says, in 1976, discussion arose over the impending expiration of statute of limitations of the hijacking. The indictment formally initiated prosecution that can be continued should the hijacker be apprehended at any time in the future. So I guess that means he could be punished for it.
Initially, it was deemed a 5-year limitation. Initially, he was going to be tried for the felony of air piracy, which has a statute of limitations of 5 years. Then a grand jury indicted him on hijacking, which has no statute of limitations.
Oh, okay.
So air piracy would have a 5-year limit, but hijacking a plane, which includes hostages, there's no statute of limitations for that. So he could be tried for that forever.
Okay.
So that's why he'd never come forward, because he'd be tried unless, again, some of your suspects that you talked about, those guys had a lot of deathbed confessions claiming to be Dan Cooper, and none of them showed the money.
Yeah. So if he was, let's say he was 40 years old in 1971, right?
Yeah.
So that would make him born in 1931, right?
Let's say he was born in 1925. Make him older.
Make him older? Okay, so if he...
Oh, no, sorry, we should make him younger. Let's say he was born in 1935.
Okay, so if he was born in 1935 today, he would be 85 years old.
Right. And that's the average. And that's,
yeah.
Theoretically, he's dead.
He's dead now, but did he survive the fall?
I don't think so. Because the conditions were absolutely wrong for jumping out of a plane.
Uh-huh.
And, that's just the biggest part of it. The only reason I don't think we found his body is that it got caught up in the river and it got flushed out to the Pacific Ocean, which is not impossible, because if he did land somewhere in the Portland Riverbank area, it wouldn't have been too far of a journey to the ocean, right up the Columbia River.
You know what? If I had to guess, I would say that I think he probably did not survive the fall also. And I think the biggest evidence of that is the fact that kid found the money. I think that shows that something went wrong.
Unless he buried it there for later use.
On a riverbank? That doesn't seem smart.
Maybe it was the only place he could bury it.
And that kid said the money was disintegrated, or not the kid, but money was disintegrated.
The kid found it 10 years after.
Correct.
Right? So maybe if he'd landed and he'd buried some for future use. And
okay, again, mister, he died on the impact, and now you're talking about...
Let's be honest, $20 was or $200 was still missing.
$200?
Of the bundles, you said that they had...
That's not $200. That's a lot more than...
No. They said they had 10 missing $20 bills. That's $200.
I don't know, man.
Either way, the point is, none of it's been used. That's my biggest part. None of the money has been used, found, or tracked, except for that bundles on the beach, which means, no matter who you are or what you're doing, that money should have been somehow tracked and used.
Right.
Even in the U.S., even to get out of the country, unless he had a couple $1,000 saved up somewhere nearby, in a hotel room in Portland.
suspects. But
I don't think he made it. If he did, he got away with one of the all-time greatest crimes.
Yeah.
It's a good story.
That's why
And he is a legend. Whether
He
you
is-
want to put it as a good or bad thing, he is a legend.
yeah, famous or infamous, right? But there's a reason why, like, you named a dozen shows that have ripped off the story to make plot line.
All right, should we end it here?
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to episode 2 of 1 minute and 43 seconds. Thank you so much, Sohaib, for being a guest tonight. And thank
Thanks
you,
for
Wesley.
having me.
Anytime. And thank you, Wesley, also, for being here.
Wes is here.
Wes is a quiet one, but we love him. I just stuttered like 8 times. I'm going to have to do some major editing, but thanks for listening. This podcast has been approved by Skipper the Cat. Right, Skippy?